That's true. That's true.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to everyone for coming. So this is a board work session. My name is Chris Weigert. I'm president of the school board. And maybe just talk a little bit about work session because this is like a board meeting, but it's not really like a board meeting. So we have no action items today. This is really our opportunity as a board to get together, to have a dialogue and discussion. We want to be compliant though with open meeting laws, and so we publish in advance an agenda, and it's televised that members of the community can listen in or sit in the audience. So again, appreciate everybody being here. So we'll just turn this over to Superintendent Wimmer. You gonna kick this off?
I will. So, and I think all of our collaborative agencies know and understand we've been having some dialogue here around our facilities in the context of budget, upgrading facilities, and certainly safety. And then just wanting to hear, we know that we do some training together in pieces, but an opportunity, as Chris said, in an open dialogue, we're not bound by Robert's rules, but our work is transparent and being live streamed now and can be accessed by archive. So in case anyone from your agencies wanted to check it out as well, it'll be there. So our agenda for today, we'll do some introductions. We'll go through the purpose, which I was foreshadowing a little bit, give you a background around our district, and then we'll go through the elements of kind of safety, incident management, those pieces, and some of our recommendations based on best practice. At any point, it's open dialogue, ask questions, offer opinions, those pieces. I know that I'll foreshadow this now. In the back end, the recommendations are kind of a dashboard, if you will, of best practice around facilities. You know, the communications around different training things, all of those, kind of where we're doing good. I've got a heat map on it, and where we might have some recommendations. So that's probably where we'll spend a considerable amount of time tonight. So I'd like to just start with introductions. Here's who's here. Chris Weigert, our board president, has introduced himself. Jen Wimmer, superintendent, going on my third year. Many of you I know.
Chuck Blaisdell, Deputy Chief of West Bend Fire Department.
Jerry Kudik, Fire Chief at the Fire Department. Brian Bosco, Police Chief in Jackson.
John Donaldson, board member.
Melanie Ehrgott, board member.
Tim Deering, West Bend PD. Dave Ross, Director of Facilities. Tim Harder, Director of Technology.
Kurt Rutholz, Board Member.
Connie Schmidt, board member. Emily Melstrand, Director of Student Services.
Joel Eimert, Board Member, and thank you, Chiefs and Deputy Chief, for being here. This is quite a session we got going tonight, so thank you for being here.
It's exciting. Usually we get to do that. Our audience members, I'm also going to highlight, are also staff in buildings and grounds. We have Corey and Andy who have some supervisory responsibilities. Corey takes point on a lot of safety pieces and support that way. So just thank you for being here as well. And feel free to contribute as well. So this is the fundamental piece of continuous improvement for our district. A foundation piece is safety and security. And we're talking about kind of a general overview. There's a lot of pieces that we are not going to go through for the sake of everyone at this table and our public. Our specific plans are private to us. They're shared with these agencies and they're shared in closed session with our board members, and that's done purposefully. If we think a question's straying into that area, you know, we can frame another discussion at another time. Safety plans are something we go over annually. I think we did it just last December or January, we signed off on those as well. So we'll have that opportunity, and I'll show you what goes into them. They're about 96 pages per site because they're really specific. So just kind of going over our purpose, what we are, and kind of aren't going to get into a little bit today. And we'll help you stay away from that because we don't give away everything that we're doing to the whole public. Just a reminder how large our service area is. We serve multiple cities, villages, towns, and work with multiple agencies who are certainly well-versed in interagency collaboration, as are we. One thing I always highlight in any venue that I go to when we're talking about safety is how proud I am of our relationship with our partners. So I've been an administrator for 25 years. I've worked with a lot of departments in my time, and the collaboration, the connection on practice, on even operational things, on bringing situational awareness, being proactive, is bar none with our partners. So that's something that we should be really proud of, and it's something that we don't necessarily see in a lot of communities, and we talk about us kind of stepping out to help model that for others too.
This is Nancy Justman, another board member joining.
Hi, sorry, traffic was not my friend on my way home from Milwaukee.
We could have gotten you a police escort, but they're.
I seem to be
they're all
busy,
here.
so I would probably need the sheriff anyways to get all the way in.
In addition to our police and fire, we are certified sheriff as mutual aid, and also in some circumstances, the public health department. You know, anytime we're responding to a crisis, there's wraparound services, and pieces that we could be, calling them in as well. So there's, again, some of the components, you start with threat detection, so it's just making sure everyone's aware of some of the foundational pieces. And like I said, then we'll get into that matrix, but ask questions, make comments along the way. One of the pieces is making sure we have shared language. Our chief sees something, say something, and little kids hear that from all of us and they mimic it. We've had kids come in and like, I needed to, chief said, even if it's my friend, I have to say something, you know? And that's a true story. I told them, I'm like, I'm gonna make your day. You know, they're listening to that. So we really try and hit that messaging with everyone around their obligation. You know, hey, even if you're questioning it, just say something to whether it's moms or dads or family members at home, it's someone in school. We do have multiple lines that can be reported to the school. We have a speak up system and a speak out and out, which is more of a state. The difference in those, so there's magnets in our buses, they're everywhere. Some are reported directly to the school. You can text and call on that line. It has an anonymous component. That's a really big factor in having a reporting piece. And the other is through the state. So it's reported there and gets kind of sent out to any jurisdiction that might be needed. And then we also have Gaggle. That's a filtering service that Tim oversees, Tim Carter. And that is a filter system that will send alerts for any kind of communication, anything that's getting typed into our computers, search for our computers. It's got keywords and administrators get an alert. So that's catching those pieces, alerting us, and then we're getting connected where we need to. And we certainly also we'll talk about social media a little bit later, but we're certainly monitoring those. We don't have anything that's monitoring that and sending us alerts. That's more a lot of eyes are looking at it and people are well versed into seeing something, saying something, catching it online and notifying any one of our agencies to help with that emerging social media world. Any questions on some of the reporting, monitoring, or those pieces?
Less of a question, and I certainly don't want to delay our meeting. I know we have a lot there.
No.
But I think one of my downfalls is not explaining all the time our strategy, not the specifics and our details, but understand, just maybe assuming that people understand that there's more to. So I just want to take 2 seconds about see something, say something. Yep, it's our mantra. It's encouraging people to report. But it is more than that. It's a strategic initiative to start having the best crime prevention is an engaged public. And we're preaching that in our community, and we're bringing that then also with that see something, say something into our schools too, and in partnership with your staff, making sure that it's not just about reporting or paddling, it's about being engaged in the overall safety of the school, of the student body, of the staff. And it really is something, I think, if we spend some time kind of thinking through that, it's more than just all of those options to see something and say something, which we embrace all of them. We embrace having as many options to report and involve staff, police, our whole Overwatch system to make sure that we're focused on safety. But it is more than just a reporting system. It's philosophically engaging the students and staff to be part of school safety. It's not a small piece.
It's
a large
also something that we try and jointly reinforce messages. So if Chief's deploying a message, I'm going to pick it up and run it in my newsletters. And I'm going, we're going to piggyback to reinforce and reach those households because, as you said, even if they don't have something to report, absence of reporting, we're asking for people to have conversations at home. And that, as you said, that engagement even at home, in the community, those pieces is really helpful. on that. I know, Ryan and I, when I'm sending out a district message, I'm copying my chiefs, like, this is what we got going on, or I'm asking for input in those pieces. Because again, we've got some direct communications to help reinforce that as well.
Sure. And I don't share that speech as a speech. I share that because I think we don't always inform all of us what's going on. So we end up in maybe meetings like this and say, maybe we're not focused on safety when there's so many layers that are there. We're trying to share that with you tonight a little bit to say that there's more underneath that.
One thing that our board should celebrate, our district should celebrate, because we might take it for granted a little bit, is the level of student services that we provide. We have full-time counselors, psychologists, a little shy of full-time family liaisons in and assigned to every single of our individual schools. So then our larger campuses, your Silverbrook, your Badger, and your high schools certainly have additional staff. So we have a very low student services staff to ratio. In a lot of other districts, you're seeing them having to pick up different buildings, travel, et cetera. That's a commitment that the district has made before I got here and persisted with, but that's really a commitment, and it's not something that you see always. So again, shine a light on being proud of that. Another thing, we have interagency agreements with licensed therapists who come and we give office space at every single one of our campuses, so that kids are getting access to mental health supports through those agencies, and they can tap into whether it's state aid, their own insurance, et cetera. We're providing that spot, so there's no kind of having to come pick up a child, barriers of transportation, loss of instruction. We do that right on campus. And then we do have our MOU with West Bend Police Department on our school liaison officers, 4 of them. We've talked about that a little bit before. And then what Ryan's providing, Chief Jackson, is daily support at the school. They're there at arrival, they're there at dismissal, they're doing walkthroughs through the day, as well as our West Bend Police, in addition to our officers who are assigned to schools and them working with each other. Your day shift officers are also creating a connection with our schools and presence as well. And there's also different programming along the way.
I'll have a large number of mid-shift officers upset with me if I don't speak both shift, day shift, and then mid-shift starts at 2 p.m. So they're also liaison and assigned to elementary and parochial schools that aren't being staffed by SLOs either. So both shifts making those contacts.
Wonderful. And then we do a fair amount of staff training. So we have modules and a training cycle that we need to go through. And it goes through everything from, your no different than your own workbook or pathogens and all that, to mandatory reporting, first aid, safety, all of those general things. So a fair amount of proactive training. Threat assessment, Emily might jump in at any time, but the Department of Justice this is a really big framework around when something could be perceived as a threat. We might be investigating, we might be consulting with our agencies, but we're going through this entire process, which is a lot of pages long, with a whole team. You're not assessing a threat in isolation, and a lot of times we're collaborating with law enforcement on those pieces. So again, framework was developed by the Department of Justice, the Office of School Safety that was created, and it's a very comprehensive process. It could be as minute as a student, maybe a 6-year-old making something that this is not a threat, I wish you were dead, that kind of thing, and really teaching, building understanding, assessing, and kind of the why in those moments, all the way to they've launched something, questionable on social media, we're getting word of it, we're pulling in that, and we're doing an assessment. Anything, Emily, that you want to add, or any of our chiefs who've had experience having to do threat assessments?
I would say, one of the benefits of having our SLOs on campus is they've been able to be a part of this process too. So when we have a situation where we're really trying to determine the level of risk, a student has said something, done something, posted something, we're able to pull those individuals into that conversation, and it really gives a different perspective. So it's our student services team, it's an administrator, and then that perspective of our school resource officers. And, the goal of that is always to mitigate risk, to identify, what is the level of concern, and then how do we respond in support of our school community, and then on behalf of that student as well. And I think the next slide might actually highlight, I can't quite recall, but, often when we go through that process, it results in an individual plan to support that student. Sometimes that plan continues if there's no risk or low risk, they return to their building and we put a plan in place. And if that risk is more elevated, sometimes that results in that student being removed from the campus and a very, very individualized plan put in place, always with the intent of getting that student prepared to go back with their peers at some point in time based upon that continued assessment. Any other comments from anyone on fun assessment?
This is a work session, so everyone can talk and contribute. We expect you to talk, so.
I wanna, highlight the work that Emily's department does to maintain the health and awareness of all of our students emotionally and physically. And I think the early intervention that they do helps. We can't underestimate, and we can't measure what doesn't happen because of what they do. So I'm really proud of our district in that way.
Not to slow down the discussion, maybe some of our law enforcement and first responder partners can comment on what's changed over the last 20 years, right? You all hear about social media. I mean, what challenges are we facing around threat assessment? Threats that may have come 20 years ago compared to now. Some things may be the same, but my guess is there are different avenues and different areas of expertise many people around this table need to have in order to function through a threat assessment. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. When these things come in, and we've had a few, even in Jackson, where, it might be 10 o'clock p.m. and I get a phone call, hey, we just had this happen in the house on a TikTok video that a student posted. And now we're investigating that. I'm talking with Jen at 10 o'clock at night. I'm talking with Chief Deering. We're coming up with a plan. And a lot of times we have to deal with them immediately, right? We have to evaluate the threat and find out what's going on. But there's so many different apps out there and different things that people can message each other on that we have to get on top of and track down, and then stay in communication with the school. And then it's the next day, right? The actual threat assessments and those types of things. So that, and just obviously taking everything, even if it's not, well, that's probably not a real threat. Everything is taken seriously and looked into and investigated 100%. I don't know that that was the case 20 years ago, but it certainly is now.
We don't necessarily deal with the threat side, but the response side of it is unbelievable now. How we coordinate with other area departments, fire departments, EMS units, the police. We've never worked more with West Bend regarding what every 2 years we do a scenario or 3 or 4 years and those kind of things. But just the work that we have to do to coordinate a response is unbelievable. Years ago.
And the increase in mental health response and responding because it gets to that point where it's.
Correct.
Yeah, I'll say everything has changed. Social media is a force multiplier for good on some levels and for just really complicating and force multiplying that threat. Our concern is always not just the initial threat, but any of the copycat threats that come with it. Hello, Cap. Cap was at an assessment center for another department and got here as soon as he could.
We'll pass it
I
over.
didn't see it at all.
Sheboygan
County at all.
I can't say the same for my.
But it's absolutely changed. One thoughtless comment in the hallway when most of us were in school could have been handled one way. One thoughtless comment on Snapchat can very easily be national, right? And we've actually tracked down a fairly significant amount of threats that we believe are specific to our area or district, and they're coming from the east and west coast, and it's a continuing trend that's just being repeated. So that certainly has made the job more challenging. Again, force multiplying. I'll say I'm glad Emily's staff is there and is focused on healing and making sure we're returning, but this is probably the only, I don't think we ever disagree. I just think our missions might be different, that I am very clear with our officers and with the community that we have a zero tolerance approach to any threats of violence or violence within our schools. And that sounds harsh initially unless you know the entire background of it. Is what we have found out is that when we're trying to invoke, juvenile justice, I'm sure you're aware of this, I'll just say, but juvenile justice is designed to make sure that we understand that kids don't have full life knowledge to make good decisions. They're going to do stupid things. Juvenile justice is there to try to protect them for the rest of their life and get them back being productive members of society with as limited impact as possible. That being said, we rely on our partners to make sure there's follow up, to make sure that that threat is addressed, to make sure that outside of even the school area. So we found out through Department of Human Services, that's who handles our juvenile intake, which is like a criminal charge for a juvenile, is if we often referred it informally. We would say, hey, Timmy said something dumb, and we just want you to talk to his parents. And what we found is because of the same story everywhere, caseload, staffing, resources, most of those went into a quick letter back to us saying that services weren't going to be offered and it wasn't met the threshold. When we seek a criminal charge, a juvenile referral, it's not because we think we want this kid in jail. It's we want to make sure they get services. We know the district's going to get those services, but we want to make sure they're held accountable at getting those services. When we issue a criminal charge on a juvenile, it triggers statutorily. It's called a YAZI assessment. Forgive me, it's become our vernacular, so I forget what it stands for now. Youth assessment, something, right? But it's a 40-point assessment that has to be done statutorily by DHS, which means they have to meet the child and the parent or guardian in person at DHS. If they don't, it's automatically referred to the courts for prosecution. That child and that YAZI assessment then is determined what level of services those children receive. And they're also entered into a statewide database. 71 counties in the state enter any YAZI assessment into the database, so as families move from county to county, we don't start fresh and say, this is a kid that we need to make sure we're helping, make sure we're giving more services, make sure we're keeping them maybe a closer eye on, which is what we see a lot, right? These people moving around. 71 out of 72 counties enter into the database, and we're able to, the DHS is able to look at that and say, this is a child that's vulnerable and we need to provide more services. So it's twofold from our department's perspective. I know Ryan feels the same way. So both our departments. It's twofold. It's one, to make sure that there is a clear understanding of expectations that we will not tolerate violence or threats of violence in our schools. That's number one. It's changing cultures and putting in that engagement piece with the see something, say something, and other pieces we're going to talk about. But then two, really, it's to make sure that services are available. So that's kind of our approach. Sometimes we have to discuss that a little bit to understand that the 12-year-old that was out on the playground making gun fingers with his gun, saying, I'm going to come back in and shoot the classroom. We know it was just stupid, but we need to make sure that they are offered the services and that follow-up. And I want a parent with that child going to DHS, right? Little confession time. I got a little bit of trouble when I was a kid. Nothing like this, of course, but having to go with my father was life-changing. I didn't care about I did care, but it was my dad taking the day off of work to take me in. That altered my path. And so we want to give the kids the same opportunity here because they're kids, good kids. They'd say dumb things, but somewhere out there could be the one that's actually going to fall through. We can't allow that to happen, and we do that by setting a culture of not tolerating it at all. It's almost becoming cliche, but we all know going to the airport, you don't say bomb. You're not getting on your plane, you're going to be detained. Nobody questions it anymore. And we need to have that get to the same exact spot in our community at least, our communities, that's the same thing that kids understand. You don't say those things. It's just, there's no joke and it's gonna have consequences. So that's our zero tolerance approach, but we work hand in hand with that. I do want to say before we move too far on, also, it's not just within the district that your staff does wonderful things, because Ryan and I go to stakeholder meetings with ACS, your team is there, always advocating for the students in the district. At the ACS stakeholder meetings, we're dealing with mental health issues. The community care organizations put together through the nonprofits, your team is there advocating for students and staff. I'm really proud to be part of your team.
And I think too, one of the nuances, as you said, we're not afraid to pick up the phone and reach each other if it's 10 p.m., if it's 2 a.m. We are never going to be caught coming in unaware into a situation, whether it's in the case of a threat or if it's a child. You know, I've received calls from the sheriff too. We've just had a fatal car accident. You have a student who's lost a parent, you know, those kinds of things, so that we're wrapping around kids no matter what's happening. But certainly in the case of a threat, we're not coming into the day and starting fresh. We're on it together into the evening. We talked a little bit around that intervention. Again, someone could be a threat to themselves. It could be a self-harm scenario. We're lining them up with services, supports. It could be, you know, a problem, a poor choice in behavior, and you're looking at consequences that could reach the level of expulsion. Referral to police, you know, that kind of thing. We do collaborate often, we consult with each other often to really identify that response. We do have interagency communication and collaboration, so if someone's hitting the court system doing things, we're getting notices and able to go through. So you can't slide underneath the radar, even if you did an offense somewhere out in the community, we're gonna know. So that we can adjust any kind of monitoring or plan of support. When we talk about plans of support, you know, let's just say in the instance of a child making a mistake, they may be removed from campus for a period of time. They may have outside services. We may force, let's say, again, it's a concern about self-harm, they're a threat to themselves. It could be through, you know, risk of suicide, substance abuse that's emerging. We might force some services, some assessments, those kinds of things, force that hand. But all of those are through formalized agreements with the student, the family, and ourselves. We're each kind of making that commitment and that expectation and setting out what those next steps or consequences are. They're tightly monitored throughout the course of agreements. They don't, they might sunset after a while, but it's really phased and it's very situationally dependent. So again, anyone who is at risk of harming others is not really going to be present in our school, you know, for whether it's a suspension through a consequence or for a period of time. We're just not. Again, we're not going to get too much into our individual plans, but know that every single school and building has a safety plan. To the right there, that tiny print is just a sample of the table of contents of every single facet of a plan. Like I said, they run around 100 pages per site to really deal with all those pieces. They're on file with everyone that you see here, as well as our Department of Justice. We utilize those for training. We do shared trainings. They're running interagency trainings with each other. West Bend just coordinated, used our high school this summer. We're sitting at conferences together, so we're doing shared training. We're doing drills. We're doing drills that are overseen by law enforcement. You guys come in and certify us, help certify for Project Adam and all that, giving us feedback on even just our health response. And those are ongoing that we review and revise. As you said, it's not a static field. You know, there's always something new emerging. So again, there's a lot of cross collaboration in those. So it's just making sure everything's accessible. Again, that maybe the newest element is having the Department of Justice, things being on file, and when they created the Office of School Safety, really giving kind of frameworks and pieces like that. So anything anyone wants to add about training or kind of the preparedness side? I know I've got a NIMS part in here too.
I think the other thing is that we've also kind of made a Reader's Digest version of that document and circulated that around because it's good for building administrators to sit down and read and understand everything that's in there and know it, but the average person just needs the quick guide.
And having a team, a leadership team who's very well versed so that you can execute and everyone can fall in and listen to what is the direction given. Because you're responsible for just navigating some of those pieces and responses. So with that said, there's an organization that's been around for lots and lots of years, the I Love You Guys organization, and it's really helped to standardize response across schools. Way back in the day, you want to talk about what's changed? Do you remember code language? I mean, you used to go into a school and there was like a code for something. They didn't use plain language, it wasn't consistent. So it's standardizing your language, the visuals, and the response. And it's something that we communicate openly to our students. We do the drills in these different areas. And then we also inform our parents, because that's a key piece, right? Is practicing 4 different scenarios. And I don't think I need to go through all of those components unless anyone has anything to add, but that was really a big step forward for agencies to kind of standardize that language. And it's not everywhere just yet, but it is something that we talk about across our agencies here. Anything else anyone wants
Well,
to say?
I think the other thing is like the language that's in the standard response protocol has been integrated into our overall emergency operations plan with all the symbols and everything else. So again, we're trying to be as consistent as we possibly can.
It's a good system. We just, Captain and I just pushing it on a couple of other agencies within our community or non-secure Tom Harbor, let's call it. We're just talking to them about the treatment center. Yeah, thanks. Great.
Struggle with that word.
There are organizations, if you don't know the background, it's the parents of a student who was a victim herself of a shooting, and that was the last text she sent to her parents, was I love you guys. And that family made this their mission, and it has evolved. They have some of the best training tools. There's a video catalog that's age. It's really developmental that, kids can watch a little video on, oh, this is what this looks like, and this is why I might do that kind of thing. So they have really, really good tools, very clear communication. So again, that's why you see people going through that.
Sure, the most valuable piece of it is it's actually usable, right? And we have systems in place that are only going to be in the most crisis of crisis. You'll never use it in your crisis of crisis. This we use on a fairly regular basis. Someone's having a medical emergency, when EMS is coming in, we'll use the whole. And that's what we were explaining, is everything isn't always 100. It's the things in the middle that you can utilize as systems.
One
It's a
thing
very
that's
good step forward.
One thing that's probably changed too is the level of communication, in the day of handheld phones, kids are communicating with their parents faster than we can even get communications out, which is fine, but we want to circle back and push communication so people are really aware of the faxes we can give them, that today there was medical hold, there was a hold and it was so someone could get medical attention, we were in and out, we're trying to communicate. You're trying to communicate as quickly as possible. When you think about situations, maybe that others have had, when you're lapsing in that, then you can have people start responding to the school or, doing things of that nature. And it's like, we just need people to hold and wait for direction on what's going on. We do also now more consistently communicate when something is a drill. There had been a couple instances where fire alarms were pulled and, then people became victims and all of that. And we don't want to create fear in students. So there were some shifts in that, just making, a little bit more situational awareness about we're having a drill today so that we're not instilling panic in kids. We're doing some prep work around maybe some special populations in navigating that and learning about that and taking away that sense of fear. So those are some of those nuances that shift around communications in those scenarios. One thing that I talked about too was NIMS. It's the National Incident Management. It's built on these foundational pieces. That is something that we, all administrators are required to go through certain modules of training. so that we, interagency, are speaking the same language. We're talking about and saying who is incident command, who is communicate, who are doing these different roles. If it was, a threat, a safety piece, you're gonna have a lot of agencies arrive on site, and we have to be interconnected. We have to have shared language, and we have to know who's doing what, so we're stepping out of the way. And any kind of police scenario where they're responding, we are taking a step back, we are turning the campus, the situation over to the police, and then we're responding in these supporting roles for that. Most often the communication piece and some of the other particulars. Our incidents can be everywhere. It might not be on a campus. We've responded to bus accidents. We've responded to, campus incidents, all of those. But again, it's just the nuance of those pieces. It's something that you have to train on probably pretty consistently. We're predominantly here to help kids learn. It is not our whole role, right? It's a piece of everyone's role. So staying sharp on that when it's not our full role is a challenge that we have in that. But again, it's going across systems. There's just another slide directly from FEMA around the whys behind that. But again, it's so you're responding and you're not missing areas of needed response, and you're not getting in the way of a response that's needed. Anything to add to those?
We live by things.
Right.
Fire department does, we brought the police kicking and dragging, but we're getting them.
Actually, Chair, that was gonna be my comment. Fire service is well ahead of their curve on ICS, and we're catching up. We see the value in it.
And that's when we train together, that's what we work on the most is that aspect of it.
Can you describe generally what happens in a situation where there could be a typical fire department response, but also maybe some issues around safety where there would be police involvement? What are there general rules as to someone has to be in command? I mean, is it, you've got to get the fire under control before this, or is it highly dependent? And I'm asking probably.
Yeah, no, that's
both
fine.
question.
The reason that we say we brought the police kicking and dragging with the NIMS table was because they're so independent and they need to move and they need to move now. Whereas we're a coordinated usually response. So you'll see a guy in a car come first or whatever, goes to an engine, he's gonna set up command. He's gonna talk to the police, see where they're at, see what they need, and then somebody from the police will come to the command post. And that's really how it starts, is at the command post with everybody being able to coordinate what kind of responses. So we'll be able to see if Tim needs anything first before, or if he wants a secure area before we go in it and all those kind of things. So what you would see here in a situation like this is you would probably have your initial officers in the building making whatever assessments they need. And then we would start the command post outside, have police and fire both there, and then we work together on what needs to be accomplished.
In the school district.
Correct. And yeah, I think that was my good point. That's where we would need somebody of your knowledge, Dave over there at the command post, and that's where they should be. So,
And especially those people who have intimate knowledge of the buildings, Andy's overseeing and working in the high school, you have those people, you might be holding back the custodian or maintenance people who are there who have intimate knowledge of the building, different crawl spaces, et cetera, that kind of thing. So you're determining kind of what it is you're responding to and who you need and who needs to be where.
Yeah, I think that perception of it being adversarial is for the movies. We've never had that. We've never had that in our careers together when we've gone to fires or car accidents. We have our role to protect the scene, protect them while they provide aid. They take care of providing the aid for the fire, or getting the people safe and treatment. And then we do our investigation after or while it's happening. It's always collaborative. So yeah, actually, even I'm glad you said it, because we said the school district would take a step back. It's step back from being the number one decision maker. You become a third of the number one decision maker with fire and police. And we would probably be together to make sure that we're deploying our resources correctly. So Ryan might be in charge of PD to make sure every law enforcement chief is taking care of all of these. Remember, it's going to be 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different law enforcement agencies. It's certainly on fire side. We depend on a lot of the volunteer, smaller departments to come in and bring it. That's why they're so good at ICS, because like you say, it's always been a collaborative issue. but we're also gonna hear people. I take us back to the incident, our little mini riot that we had. It was a great example of how we would work together. There was never just stay out of our way while we accomplish it. It was a lieutenant and a school administrator, a detective and a school administrator, two sharing laptops, getting this stuff together to accomplish our goals, working collaboratively. That's how it's always going to be. We're gonna have some priorities, right? And we're gonna need to take care of some things first, but it's never gonna be, you'll never see Jerry and I duking it out to see who's in charge. Probably the other
We
way.
both know
You
it's
say, you do it.
Right, we all know that's gonna be me in that case, but we're trained to find each other in that situation. You know, so,
It's very
you know, you've had people, you know, come over and, you know, they're trying to come find me, I'm finding them, like, who's command from your side, who's command from my side? And like you said, getting together, we do a lot of shared communication, a lot of shared messages. I'm thankful that I have really good editors. We all say he's a grammar snob, he's gonna get you.
I
So we
saw
laugh
this,
about those
I saw
things.
this firsthand when we had our heart attack up at the football field. And I was right there when it happened, and the police were right there, they're starting CPR. And it, from a school district perspective, it was me and a band director, and we were, well, what do you want us to do? And police say, we need you to move all these kids and all these parents out of the stands, put them on the football field, which they're not used to going out onto the football field, you know, so it was directing traffic. And then it was the police saying, we want this lane open because EMS is on the way, and here's where they're gonna enter, and we need all the people out of the way. And then they take over, you know, the victim, and that obviously ended up great. And not only did you save his life, but nobody got run over in the parking lot. People left peacefully, and, you know, it was a team effort between the school district, the teachers, and the people who were there, the police and the EMS. And yeah, I saw it firsthand, it's kind of neat.
So that, I mean, that's a piece that we can always strengthen. Any kind of incident recovery is guided by what kind of incident we're navigating. Was it, you know, a health piece, you know, as we said, we had a heart attack on site? Is it, you know, a fire, you know, chemical spill? Is it an actual physical safety threat? What was it? Also, in addition to interagency collaboration, we're there for each other as school districts. So you can recall a neighbor last spring having something go down. I'm actually the point person who's on the phone with their team going, what do you need? Do you need external communication support? Do you need this? Let's say we had in the Waukesha post, the parade, you're all connecting in with their point person. You're determining, do I need to send additional counselors there? Do I need to send this? You will pool and share your resources because we're all well-versed in supporting students, staff, et cetera. And then thinking around that staff side, looking towards employee assistance, whether you're dealing with individuals or maybe a whole group, we have all of those supports who can come in. We had a community drowning here, and then we were working cross-agency to make sure some of my students were lifeguards that day. Did my kids get counseling? Have they been debriefed? Have I reached out to the families? It was summer, but we're still owning that piece of those. So it really depends on what that incident is. I don't know if anyone has anything more to contribute to that. Like you said, whether ongoing investigation, that whole accountability for services that needs to be in place in an ongoing manner, and going through those things.
I can see from maybe some of your perspective, like, sounds like we're bragging, or why are you telling us all this? I think the whole point was to make sure that you understand there's a much more robust system in place dealing with all these levels of public safety within our schools and keeping our schools safe and efficient learning environments, much more robust than we ever talk about. And that partly, I think, is because we talk about this a lot, partly because we kind of think that's our cross to bear. We don't want people having to think about that. We'll think about that, so you don't have to. But maybe that's not always the greatest approach in 2022. Maybe we need to shed some light on, there is robust systems in place. Right? It'd be like, just be coming in and thinking that you guys didn't have an organizational plan. Of course you do. We don't always talk about it, and when you're at your sixth grade teacher-parent conference, but of course we have an organization. You get my point. There's a much more robust system that's in place than we ever really disclose. And that's maybe the point of tonight, is to make sure maybe instill a little more trust or awareness, I guess, that those systems are in place. Does anyone want to talk to a lady about my car insurance or my homeowners?
She's got a good feel for you, I just know it.
Stop. Susie usually.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Susie from your homeowners association.
So we talked about kind of that dashboard of where we were and if money were no object was our task, right? So the next couple slides tell you everything, from your perspectives. This is just kind of the building. We think about kind of the envelope, securing perimeters. Dave and team do a lot of this mapping and numbering systems. So you're seeing the external doors. There's 314 exterior doors. To our system, making sure you have access to maps, that you've walked our buildings before. Just responding isn't the first time you've seen our buildings, but making sure that they're really clear, because if you go to Silverbrook, 5 blue literally means nothing to you. You don't know, if I got something going down at 5 blue, or we talk about the Falcons Den is where that's happening, is meaningless and could be a barrier to time. So making sure that we're doing that is in. It's a green meaning that's in place. One thing that I have, it's, and I asked this when I first onboarded, and every now and then we check in, that window security visibility, we do have some campuses where the windows open in there and having that. But one thing for my law enforcement friends, because I think sometimes this is a piece that emerges, do you want the shades drawn or open? Sometimes we want a clear line of sight in, and students should be moved away around a hard corner, meaning they're out of sight from those line of sights, but it provides line of sight to our responders into a situation. I just have it as yellow because it was something that I should really bring up and just do a check-in on any kind of preference with you, so we can advise people or change anything. There's no right or wrong answer, just tell us. I mean, there really isn't a right or wrong answer. There's reasons for both. And I think that's one of the pieces that continues to evolve or vacillate. And some days, some years they'll say do it this way, and some years they'll say not to do it. So it was just one point where I thought, okay, we should just do a check-in on that. And if it's something we don't want to answer now, we leave it saying your primary thing is lock the door and get out of sight, and windows be down for a moment. Just make sure they're closed. So we can always
You're
answer
trying to
later.
do everything you can to not advertise that there are targets inside. There are potential victims inside.
Mhm.
So personally, I'm for blocking the windows, but I know there's definitely reasonable, articulable arguments against that as well.
My experience has been block the windows if you can.
So we're gonna do those pieces, make sure in our windows where they're openable, that they're at least minimally shut, and that if you have any kind of time, but don't make yourself a visible target, if you have that time. So that's how we'll make sure our directions go.
I was just gonna add that Dave does a great job working with our fire prevention bureau or our fire inspector, because the more secure you make it, the harder it is to get out in the event of a fire. So there has to be that balance. Tim and I talked about this periodically, but Dave does a great job, and he researches the items and things like that people handle, get them unlocked, they can have multiple locks on doors
Yeah.
and things like that, lock from both sides. So I guess you have an inspection on Monday.
And Tuesday.
Please let me remind
We'll get
you.
to all the doors. We'll get to all the doors. One of the largest things, so you're buying time, right? You're buying time for people to respond. Any kind of significant issue like that, what's the timing? It's over and done in 5 minutes, less than. So you're buying as much time to communicate for people to lock down if they need to, but you're buying time. One place to do that is in your single point secure entry. So you experience that at Badger, you experience it at Silverbrook, our most updated buildings. You can come in, you get buzzed into the building. So while we remain locked, once you walk into a building, you don't have free access there. You get funneled right into an office where there's a secondary lock in there, and some other management pieces. So that's what we talk about, having a secure entry. Because we are in a position of customer service, we're locking you out, but we're also letting you in, in those places. So not having full access to my building or even a whole wing where there are kids, that is a massive undertaking. We also have a question mark because design-wise, Dave and I talked about that, and we've talked about the future of that campus and maybe integrating our smaller kids on a campus. So we did invest a lot of time in that design work. When you look at the elementaries, again, we've got a locked vestibule area, but you're not secured and funneled to only the office. So no matter what, you're familiar with there. So that's about $400,000 to create that. McLean, the office bathroom renovation that's occurring there now, it actually makes it a little bit easier. It's only about an additional $100,000 to do that. High schools, you're looking at a $7 million overhaul because you would actually take the opportunity to, it is not constructed with a point of entry at all. People have to enter and walk through unassisted through that whole building. You'd have to do and create a central point of entry. And I left ESC blank because I would, again, as part of downsizing, right-sizing this district, I would leave us out of here and build out us over there. So that would have secure central office as well as high school office on one campus. Because again, that's the piece you're looking at, is not allowing free access to your whole school in one singular incident, and then making sure that you buy some time. Anything, Dave, facilities-wise or?
Yeah,
any
I guess I would say a $7 million price tag. Take that as an order of magnitude kind of number rather than an actual, dollar figure. Because there's gonna be a lot of things that end up shuffling around. I guess the other thing that kind of struck me, is, you guys talked about what's different from 20 years ago. When you look at our facilities, over 50% of the building space is over 50 years old. So if things changed a lot in 20 years, they change even more in 50. And, the buildings just aren't designed to any kind of standard that they would be today.
And if you've done even any work at your own home, once you peel back one layer, you trip into a bunch more.
And it's McLean.
Right, we're really on that project. But we're getting it. Yeah.
Where did the assessments come from for those values?
I'll let Dave handle that. That's,
We looked at this a few years ago and basically had some designs kind of penciled out, sketched out. So for instance, if you look at Green Tree, there's a classroom immediately adjacent to that main hallway when you come in. Basically, that classroom would become the office suite. The office suite would have to become the classroom, and then you could create that safe entryway into there.
So you can't do the same with the high school. I know the east side, the office is on the exterior side of the building. You couldn't just cut a new door into the office directly instead of creating a whole new.
you could do a lower scale project on that,
Yeah.
if that were more
I'm just saying,
immediate.
there's gotta be other option than
Yeah.
$7 million to
Well,
close in from those doors. over the office.
the old office, the old office will not accommodate the functions that go in there now. Ideally, you'd want to have your administration, counseling, all of those functions together. And then again, be able to funnel guests in through one, and typically that's where they're going to be going, is to those functions anyway. So we looked at a couple of different scenarios. Obviously, the stair towers kind of are a focal point of that building, kind of says, come here. So we tell people to go there, and then we don't let them in through that spot. But there's a lot of design things that have to go into the high school.
So you can deliver a different, our task was to look at ideal design as if cost were no option. And it's again, moving us there, putting them there, making it actually function. Some of that cost is right down below where you have your point of entry are our costliest classrooms, it's the science ones. So, having to move them and relocate those, that makes it a costly endeavor. Could you do something cheaper, faster for that? Absolutely. We talked about the locked alarm exterior doors. This is yellow, just because it's in process. Recall that the board approved that piece. The high school is complete and everyone will be phased in. This is a new piece where there will be an alarm wired into whoever the responder is if there's a door ajar anywhere on that campus. And replacing some doors that needed to be replaced or having trouble with secure closure on those, which I'm appreciative because in their shifts, all officers, whether it's Jackson, or West Bend are checking our schools. They're doing drive around and right up against the buildings and checking those pieces. So that is a project that will be finished this year, which is something new, an added security piece with that alarm exterior. We talked about, and I put this orange for discussion, locked interior doors. We have 1,928 doors in the district to deal with. And we've talked about the nuances of different strike plates and different things that are going to be allowed through DOJ, things that are going to be accessible for students who may not, have different needs, that kind of thing. One thing Dave and I talked about, and I'd like to bring forward tonight is on the edge of a door, your laptop as a door. On the edge of a door, you can do something as simple as a rubberized, like it's a little seed plant that goes around. So I'm an adult, I set my door to lock at all times. I don't have to worry about where my keys are, I don't have to worry about anything, I have that. I could push that off with a wrist, you wouldn't keep it, sometimes you see things that are too high, kids can't reach, etc. And it's just, what it's doing is keeping that door from locking. So if I've got students in and out, going to the bathroom, coming back into class, I'm not creating a disruption. It's a little something that just sits in place that keeps the door from closing. But then it reinforces adult behavior of set your doors to lock, always. So it's as easy as closing the door. So any thoughts, feelings from your standpoint around, those pieces? I'm not interfering with that, any kind of locking mechanism. It's just something that keeps the door slightly open versus any kind of hardcore modification.
When you say keeps us slightly open, out of the door jam or?
Watch, I'll just literally show you on a door. It's, they're usually like soft rubber or piece of plastic. And it just goes right here. And that just stops it from closing all the way. So my door is always set to lock. I just pop that off, whether I'm a kid, an adult, whatever, and I'm locked and in. Versus some of the
Right.
locking mechanisms I've seen.
Just the main concern though, with the smoke and things like that, in individual classrooms. Or if you're sheltering in place, you can close the door, but you can do that anyways.
Yeah.
We have less problems with keeping doors open than multiple locking of doors,
Right.
I think, so.
And that's one of the difficulties that we've got. I mean, we've got a couple buildings that actually have the hardware where you can lock it from inside the building in the event of, or inside the room in the event of emergency. But a lot of that door hardware was purchased, before my time here. It's heavy duty, commercial grade door hardware. So, a handset is going to be in the $300 to $350 range. Multiply that by 2,000, pretty soon you're talking about serious money to change all of them.
And again, there's so much of this piece that's contingent upon adult practice. So if that standard is, it's just hard sometimes, given the learning environment and what's going on in the school, to not be able to close your door. If there's something loud going on, or my class is gonna be doing a project, things like that. So to say that I can have all doors standing open all the time, okay, that's probably not a reality in those cases, especially if my classroom is adjacent to a music room or something like that. We've got pretty good design, but you can trigger to those things. But it's really coming around so that we can shape adult behavior around having their door locked and ready, and what that looks like. Because again, in a security piece, I'm looking to minimize time. I don't want to be looking for keys. I don't want to be, and I want everyone to know when I close the door, it's not just an adult function, that anyone can push that door closed and it's going to be locked and secure.
I would just say, Jen, if I could, I think you're absolutely on the right path here. Every training that I've ever been to regarding school safety has been number one, a single point secure entry in a school. That's the number one thing you should do.
Mm-hmm.
And number two is how can they secure the classroom doors if there's an incident? Now, I would say, I have to kind of go to bat for my community a little bit here. I guess it's up to the board how they choose to move forward here, but Jackson Elementary needs a whole lot more than a secure entrance.
We talked about
We're
that.
aware.
Open meeting.
We are completely aware.
That's my nice way to say it.
Watch the last board meeting, I do a shout out for our.
Completely aware that we need to just start over.
We even have the land.
There is room there. Absolutely.
I have a land, and I have a fire department, I could tell you if you'd like.
We can see that property.
Can we do the, single point entry through your?
Right here. Yeah.
And right there.
I appreciate this discussion because clearly when we talk about security and safety, they're competing interests, right? Because on the one hand, you said, great, let's install all doors that are super fortified and, incredibly able to be locked. And our chief of the fire department might say, that is a terrible idea. A fire, whereas in a law enforcement might say, that's great against defending against the intruders. So we've got to strike a balance.
And that's one of the things, talk about changing 50 years, it was always school safety, and being able to get the kids out. So we've had to change our thinking quite a bit as well, fortify doors more.
So it's just something for continued conversation. I think we're on a right path around those interior doors that we can, our largest thing is reinforcing adult practice, and student awareness around those.
Chief, you mentioned all of the school safety seminars you've been to in the past. Guess how many I've been? 0. So when it comes to a topic like this, I look to you guys as the experts who, you tell us what we should do. We get people who come to school board meetings or write us letters or call us and say, you need to get that big metal arm thing that goes down, and I saw that on the news or on, whatever. That person who recommends that, I also went to 0 school safety seminars as well. So I guess my point is, you're the experts on this type of topic. And so from my perspective, I lean on you.
As do we. And I think, to our point, we're having these conversations all the time. It's our plans and that we're compliant, we're doing those things, but it's really talking about the context of our finances and our facilities so that we can make short and long-term decisions around those. All the best practices are on these slides in these pieces, and we're telling you, here's where we're at with them. The other piece is surveillance that's not just closed, that it's accessible to our partners in law enforcement. And we do have all of our exteriors with video surveillance. You can see there's some nuances. We don't have interior video surveillance at our elementaries, but we would recommend some upgrades to some places for the exterior, to put it in place in the interior of our elementary campuses, and then to fortify what we have on the secondary sites. Keep in mind that when you do that, you're looking at a 5-year replacement cycle, most likely. You're looking at the cameras, the licensing, the agreements, and then making sure that you're continuously keeping up with that. So that's an area that could be bolstered around those pieces as well.
Jen, could we stop for a moment and talk about secure entry? So I certainly understand single point. And sadly, I think for several of the recent tragedies, some of those schools did have a single point, and we still had someone get through those doors who was, looking to do harm. So, outside of, having an officer there frisking every person who's rolling in, remind me, I haven't had to drop a kid off at Silverbrook for a good long time. But so if I'm buzzing at the door to say, hey, Jimmy forgot his lunch, does the secretary or whomever at the door see me?
Yes.
Okay, and so that's at Silverbrook and Badger, so they see.
Any school. Any school,
Okay.
all schools are locked. You have to be buzzed in addition to this building, and there's a camera on you, and they're saying, welcome, how can I help you? Establishing, do you have an appointment? Do I have recognition? Again, we are a point of service. One shift that we've made here, whether it was safety-minded or just an efficient practice, was having centralized enrollment here. So everyone is coming here to be centrally enrolled as a new family, instead of a new person popping up saying, I want to enroll. We'll welcome you, we'll talk to you, and we're going to route you to centralized enrollment and all of those things. Because again, we're letting in people in a daily practice who, again, with 800 kids on campus, I may or may not recognize every family member. It might be grandma's dropping something off. It could be whatever. So, you know, we are welcoming people, but we do have a visual on them. They're captured on the camera, and we're doing a verification coming in.
So I guess my point to look back to that, are there other measures beyond a single point and video surveillance? Like, you know, the safest school in the world, give me a break, I don't know what that is, but I'm sure you guys do. What else are they doing at that single point of entry to say, you know what, this doesn't look kosher and you're not coming in?
I
Yeah.
something, my kids went to a university school and they had a single point entry where, you get buzzed in, like you said, and then you're locked into the vestibule. You can't get past until the safety officer accepts your driver's license, it gets scanned, and, you have to wear a name tag with your photo on it and your name, before you can walk.
So we have that, that's part of our visitor management system. So you do, it's a Raptor is the product, so they're scanned in and done that. There's one point, so all of our schools, while they remain locked, and just think of when you're arriving, our students don't experience that. There's a period before and after that bell rings where that's open and there's supervisors in place. There are pieces that you can do during that, whether it's a school that has metal detectors, it's a school that has a different presence versus your staff monitoring. But at that before and after school time, there's a period where those doors are unlocked. If there's an event that we're hosting and we're going to be welcoming the community, we may unlock doors at that time, but we're stationed to supervise at those points. So just talking about the different pieces of entry.
I mean, I think there's a fine line in saying, hey, welcome to Chichita versus welcome to West Bend School. I understand that, but I mean, when we're talking school safety, I'd rather, you know, let's put it on the table of this is the most secure option. This is kind of the middle of the road, and then this is not secure at all. You know, I guess that's what I'm kind of interested in hearing. What else can we do?
I think Chief Daring was onto something when he said that you have to involve the community and the students and the teachers, and at university school, every student and every teacher knows you do not open the door for anyone, even if they're knocking, they say they need in. Like there's a culture of you don't let, everyone has to go to that single point entry, and no exceptions.
Yeah, and I believe Uvalde, the shooter came through an unsecured door. So there was,
Somebody
That is-
had propped a door open.
yeah, that is part of the whole thing is door security. But with that said, even coming into a single point of entry, I mean, is that bulletproof glass? Doubtful.
So
So
DOJ
somebody
only
with,
covered your side panels. that are
somebody with
adjacent.
malicious intent could look, you know, could get through if they wanted
When
to.
you talk about that, and we're very real about that in school safety, like you said, if someone wants in, they're gonna bust glass, they're gonna do, if they want in, then again, the best thing I can do is buy time. And have sound communication systems to seek help and buy that time, so that people can get safe.
I think the other piece is having a human element that is very, very early on has eyeballs on them. Not through a camera, not through an intercom system, because somebody looking through like that proverbial peephole, okay, hi, I'm here for blah, but then you have no idea to study body language, to look, you know, what they're carrying, or they bring, and that human element has to be, I guess, sensible enough to trust their gut, that this isn't a parent, this isn't a grandparent, this doesn't look right, and sound the alarm. Sound the alarm meaning, oh, please, this doesn't look right.
Right.
Somebody that's there to challenge them, somebody that's there to, excuse me, hold on. Or if there is that secondary, like pause that second door so that they can't get any further, and now they start breaking glass, which I don't care who you're, that's a red flag to everybody, right?
Right,
So there
right.
might be some people that might go, I don't know, I wouldn't call the cops on him, but you might, you know, so
Sure.
there's that whole thing, like, should I, shouldn't I? But when you start breaking glass, I think that alerts almost all of us, and they'll say, okay, get 911 on the horn because we need more cops here.
Right, I mean, as we're looking at how we move forward, you know, and if you're gonna be looking at building new schools, which I certainly hope we are, or, rebuilding entrances. I mean, is there a way to even make that vestibule slightly different, especially at the elementary level, right? How many times any of us parents have rolled in because, Jim forgot his lunch? Well, is there just literally a lunch drop where I can pop it and there's a window that pops down and I just push it through and I'm like, here's Jim's lunch. I don't need to talk to anybody. Like, he forgot his lunch, or, Sally forgot her homework, whatever. Here it is. I'm not coming in. I just want to drop it off. Lack of a better word, we're almost like a drive-through. Like, I don't have time for this anyways. I gotta get to work and you're irritated.
I think I could get a lot of parents signed on for that.
I
think
that's
that's
for moms.
Yeah.
I mean, who has not,
Just gonna drop off the bag.
who has not ran in and be like, here?
Nancy's just throwing things out the window.
Nancy's almost done, so she doesn't drop off anymore.
To Captain's point about the human element, I'll share my experiences at Silverbrook, having to drop off the Viola many times.
I feel your pain.
And just showing up a couple weeks ago full uniform for an assembly, still getting a third degree over the camera saying, and why are you here? And I made sure to say, awesome job.
Yeah.
That's really neat, because it is going to be the human element of our staff, of our students that are engaged to do that. We can build, it's always a balance between safety and efficiency. We want the safest school, 100% virtual. Then our only school violence is actually domestic violence. That's the safest school, right? That's not reasonable, that's not good education, so there is this spectrum, right, that's going to be in place. And so we have to think about we talked about the safest parade is we'll hold a Christmas parade and we won't let anyone come. We'll put fencing around it and we'll live stream it. Nobody wants that. They want to see Santa Claus. Right? They want that. So we have to find that balance. So there is reasonable things to do to find the balance. There is ways to prioritize, because I know one of the marching orders for tonight was, what if money wasn't an issue? And I appreciate that concept, but money is an issue. Money is always an issue. Our resources are always an issue. We're stewards of the taxpayers' money. There's always going to be a driving force behind what we do. So, like in any other circumstance, we have to prioritize what is going to have the greatest impact. What is our biggest threat? Right? What are we trying to do? And unfortunately, in today's day and age, we're driven by what is really an anomaly. The threat is really an anomaly against our students, right? An active shooter attack is still statistically an anomaly. But it's such a crisis and such an awful, terrible, traumatic event that we have to prepare for it like it's going to happen tomorrow. And we have to spend our resources to do it. It's a sad state, but it's the reality. So we have to prioritize where we're at. I do agree, we're on the right path. There's some harsh realities. If we're going to really have a conversation, there are some harsh realities. We live in a very safe community. Our schools are very safe. It's in part because of our infrastructure. We can make it better, but it's mostly because of our human element, our staff, all these proactive things that we've put in place, which is crisis response. People forget that, but all the proactive things is crisis response. If we're responding to a crisis point in time, we failed. The goal is to not ever get there. But when we get there, we'll respond, and then we'll move to normalization. We'll get back to prevention. It's always that cycle. But there are some really uncomfortable conversations that we need to have if we're truly looking at how we prioritize what we harden and what we don't harden. Just as an example, when you're talking about true threat, we know that at the high school, it's important to have secure doors. It's important to have surveillance. It's important to have that. But more than likely, we'll probably invite the shooter into the high school, because more than likely then they'll be a member of the student body. It's just statistically what we're doing. It's an awful thing to say, but it's our elementaries, that's not the case. Right? Our elementaries are extremely safe. I also dropped off the bag lunches at elementaries. I've gone with full uniform and reindeer ears on to read for the Rudolph run and still been given the third degree. So they're very safe, but we can do things that John's point, how do we prevent, Captain said, how do we prevent someone with a fully automatic rifle from shooting their way through and getting in? Concrete walls all the way around into Cheetah, right? And that's not realistic either. So we have to find out where can we spend our money the best way to really make the most impact on keeping our schools safe. And those things.
And as I said, we're always looking for time so that people can respond, time for our support to get to us, to help us in that case. Because again, the reality of those incidents is that you've got less than 5 minutes for those things. So again, looking at envelope first, it was one piece, class discuss, certainly you don't need the, total remodel of the high schools, but it's once you start peeling back stuff and all the things that you have to touch, that does make it a large project. Any questions on this page around envelope? Yeah.
I just want to piggyback off Captain Roller. So the human interaction part of it, do you guys as a police departments, offer like a training to what to look for, for the person that's answering those calls for the buzzing? Like, fidgeting or agitated, whatever, anything like that? Do you guys offer like a yearly, kind of training, or maybe we could put that together as kind of
Well, that is an annual thing, but we can certainly, we have done presentations before to the support staff as well as the educators.
Sure.
And we do talk about warning signs, we do talk about behavior, not making anybody behavioral analysts or anything like that.
Right.
But a lot of it just comes down to
Basic
I'm-
ABCs.
trust your instincts. right?
I'm actually gonna speak against that because this afternoon, I was having a conversation about suicide. And we were talking about how it can actually be harmful to try to teach people about the warning signs prior, because it's pretty much impossible to anticipate exactly what a person's warning signs are going to be. And when you put the responsibility of the person who's making that call to hit the buzzer, you're potentially making them wrong if they only look at the things they were taught to look at, because a shooter could look like anybody. And it's better to have a consistent practice that's foolproof than to put the judgment into the person that's at the desk to hit the button. At least that's just my opinion.
The only thing I'll say is our approach in our trainings for all city workers, certainly done it to the staff, is less, I hear what you're saying, we're not diagnostics.
Right.
Our approach is less about educating about warning signs and more about empowering the employee to trust their gut. ABCs of safety, be aware, use backup, and care about each other. And we go through and say, everything we're gonna tell you today, your mom taught you before you went to kindergarten. And it's just empowering people to understand, trust your gut, see something, say something rolls into it, but then we just really encourage you never bothering the police department to call the police department. One thing a cop loves is going to a call and leaving without having to do any paperwork. Turns out to be nothing. So I hear what you're saying, but our training is really focused about more empowering the people to say, trust your gut. If you have any inklings, give us a holler.
And that kind of training is good for everyone, not just.
We were just at the library after the incident on election day, and that was one of the biggest questions they had. It's like, well, how do we know when the next person is gonna walk in and do something like that? And the answer is, you don't. You know what's normal, and you also know what's not normal. And it's that trust the hair on the back of your neck when it starts standing up. And maybe give that person a second glance and maybe grab a friend and say, hey, take a look. Why is that person going into the children's book area and not adult contemporary? It just, and then at some point you have to say, okay, this isn't right. And we either need to go up and say, can I help you? Or call the police, and we can come and say, is everything okay? Do you need any assistance? Identify them, figure out why they're there, and if it's innocent and harmless, we walk away, and a happy cop is one that can leave a call and not have to write a report on it. And that's a real quick ad narrative, and we checked it out, and everything seems okay.
Chief Foster will back us up on that. It's always a barrier. We have to go out to the community and get over that barrier, so you're not bothering us by calling us. We're your police department. There's strategy in that message. It's your police department. People are the police are the people, and we have to, because we're all good the majority of us are really decent, good, hardworking people that wanna like stay to themselves, not bother anyone, just wanna live their lives of quiet desperation, raise happy, healthy, productive kids, right? That's really who we are. So calling the police is like, holy smokes, we have to constantly preach. Times have changed, you gotta call us, we're here. We're here, we're servants.
That's why we're there. And getting back to your original question, John, we provide active attack training for, just like West Bend PD does, I think, for village employees, parochial school workers. I believe West Bend PD provides the instruction for the Jackson.
For learning, yeah, our
But
district.
they get it on a regular basis, so.
The one piece too that, came up in some other incidences, even though we're locked campuses, all of that, all of our first responders have full access through different means to all of our campuses. They're not locked out. They can enter at any time. So Chief's being nice and coming through and following protocol and doing that, no matter who we are. But they have access and can get into any building that we have. So there's no delay in their response, finding someone who's got a key, et cetera, when we're in lockdown.
Plus we'll break a window.
Yeah.
Right, Dave?
No.
Oh, you're gonna break one.
We need
You're gonna
to
break one.
break
You might as
Break a
well.
window.
Oh, you're right, we all carry a fob, we have it in, and you're right, it's exactly, I don't wanna spook the,
Yeah.
and I like to have them do their job, so, but we all carry a fob if it's a single.
We've made it a practice every summer to go through every school building in our jurisdiction and make sure that every officer can get into every door. So not just the main entrances, but every classroom door.
We're keyed in that manner and fobbed in that manner. We expanded our exterior fobs and access for our exterior doors. That was a piece that we worked on too, knowing that sometimes you're responding to help. To do that.
That would be a money no object, a dream I'm gonna give Dave a cardiac arrest right now, is fobbed on the internal doors under master control. There's no way you're gonna be able to afford that, but that.
$10,000 a door.
1,938 doors.
But if you're truly, if that was, we won the lottery, right, that we'd have to have Timmy in his backpack and be able to control through sections as we go through and clear. Fire would have access, all that.
Dave,
That is
new construction, all interior doors fobbed or no? No,
Can't afford it.
not too
Yeah.
much price.
Yeah, you don't see that very, very often. The next piece is around communication structures. We talked about those reporting lines, including anonymous options and how we communicate those. Those are in place across the district. One thing that would need an upgrade is our interior, exterior communications through our PA systems. We need to update and upgrade those. You can see the calculations there based on our square footage in our buildings of what that projected cost would be. Again, Silverbrook and Badger are newer construction and attended to. Our PA systems are our way that we deliver emergency messages on campus. They also go to the outside. So if kids are on the playground, et cetera, they can still hear those pieces. We would recommend doing a system upgrade there. We do have silent panic alarms. I'm not gonna talk about where they are or how we access them, but they are direct lines. So if you see something that doesn't seem right, there are silent panic alarms. We have two-way communication on site. Responders are arriving with their own two-way communication structures, but we also have our radios on there. Tim and I talked about kind of best practice for two-way communication. We would want to strengthen our replacement cycle and increase availability, that if we had to respond to an incident, I've got some that I deploy so that we're all on the same channel, same communication, that kind of thing, so that we're increasing that network of communication. We're responding, if we're doing a reunification, I'm not on a site, like what's my go bag and how many devices do I have there so that we can remain in communication. So that's a piece we would recommend. We do have a system for mass communications for our family. Again, we're never gonna beat kids and their cell phones out of the gate, but we are pretty quick. We try and get something out right away, and we work in collaboration with each other if it's a shared situation, so that we're verifying what's getting put out by who. Talked a little bit about social media. Again, we don't pay for a service. We don't do that monitoring. We are more alerted to that, either through our reporting, through diligent community members, our own staff who are monitoring certain sites, that kind of thing. And then our alarm systems, specifically targeting our fire alarm systems, need to be updated and upgraded at our older campuses. And that is some cost estimates around square footage of what those things cost to be directly wired in. We're dealing with some older systems that still are functional, so they haven't been changed, but that would be a recommendation.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things, I mean, you see these lists and they're kind of like one-of lists. But the reality of it is, if you're gonna go in and you're gonna do the fire alarm system in the building, you're gonna take down the ceilings, you're gonna do all the work that needs to be done above the ceilings, whether it's adding sprinklers, replacing plumbing mains, all that work is gonna get done all at once. It's really not an à la carte kind of menu. It has to be more of a planned type approach.
Any questions or comments from our first responders around communications, best practices that would support you if you were arriving on site?
Not necessarily on site, but that's another point that Chris brought up, is how it's changed, and that's certainly changed our structure in communicating on all of our incidents, understanding that we used to control the release of information to the narrative, and that's no longer the case. What we're trying to do is make sure there's going to be a narrative. When I say we collaboratively are trying to get ahead of providing the correct narrative, right? We've seen incidents snowball out of control that have been very small non-events turn into a very large event in the community because of the thousands of shares and those things. So I think we're better. I think we're getting better. I think we're better at it now, getting ahead and pushing out more information, which can kind of look, it's a weird dichotomy, right? It can kind of look like there's more things going on in the district and, we should be alerted and worried, when really it's just us being more aggressive with getting ahead of the incidents, making sure people understand it is under control. It really is that piece of normalization, getting us back into normal functional operation by saying, no, we've got this, and here's what happened. Instantly, as we push out our information, we're learning it on the PD side, and we know our collaboration with you, things return to normal. Things that would have spiraled out of control and cost a lot of money, a lot of resources, time, and money to get back under control, and we're getting that.
The other piece that's probably an evolution for all of us is having to deal with the media in those moments. Because of that social media and, communications going out, during situations, having to manage media at the same time, when they don't have information and making assumptions, I think of with Slinger, what they went through, the response that was there, and all of a sudden you have media on your doorstep and people are finding out thirdhand, and just having to navigate that when we're trying to deal with and respond to a situation. Media is not my priority. Your kids and my staff are my priority, but they do get in the way, and it's a fair amount of reinforcement with your families. And I even reinforced here because I have people who are parents in Slinger doing that. This is what I know. Do not go to this scene. They're not releasing your kids. Don't create another element that people need to manage. So I think that best thing is wait for direction, as hard as that might be sometimes. I think that's a new nuance that we have to navigate and around getting out information and being sensitive to the fact there's situations where we can't or won't disclose. Either there's an individual and we're over-informing, or there's going to be an active investigation, things of that nature. That's something still ongoing. So we have the systems for that. It's just I'm never going to be faster than everyone's cell phone, and try to train people not to introduce other elements onto a scene.
Used to be stressed with just dealing with Judy, but now. The two-way communication thing, I think, is an important piece, and that's why it's important for somebody as well to be at the command post from the school district,
Sure.
because you're being able to communicate with all your members as well.
Yeah, and to, like I said, we're not isolated to things in our own district because of how interconnected we are. As I said, I'm dealing with a situation with the neighbors, those staff are parents, or what can I do to support, respond, and help them in those moments. So in lending communication support. I think of our smaller districts, right? We have a communications person. I have a fair amount of communications built and ready, ready to go, and being able to share that across districts and being able to step up, step in, and say, I have communicate, what do you need? And so just offering that, I think it's a next step for us in interagency collaboration. We started really talking about this for a different means, way back in the COVID days, and looking at closures and making sure I was prepared if I was facing mass absences. But it's a new way, I think, for all districts to not operate in isolation. We started that work. It's something that I'm very familiar with my time on the other side of town, especially with a collection of smaller districts, that we support each other. So I have a Go team that's gonna go to a Germantown, that's gonna go to a Slinger. If I have to do reunification, we have a whole team across agencies that's well-versed. This is how I respond, so they can step in. I can't tell you how many times I had a certain role as a reunification team that I got called out of my district to go support another district in reunification in a meaningful way. So I think that's an area that doesn't necessarily have cost to us, but to amplify interagency collaboration and support is an area that we could grow. First aid, this is a piece that we're pretty proud of. We have different trained building response teams. We're Project Adam certified. We run drills. Our district nurse, Amy Brager, as well as our partners with Fire and EMS are helping oversee that and provide access to that training. We have first aid materials on site and casualty materials for blood loss or trauma. For everyone, we have go bags. If we're off site, we have all of those things in place. We train on that pretty consistently. And we have another point of pride for our district that I talked about is having licensed medical staff on site, whether it's LPNs, RNs, people who are running our health rooms are not the school secretary, which is unique for us. And that they are there, and my larger campuses have multiple people there, and I have backups, and I have subs, and I have all of that. The only one that doesn't have full-time licensed medical staff on site is Rolf's. They're smaller, they're right across the street, they have access to all of us and our area. So we don't staff someone there necessarily, we're more a response unit. Any piece on kind of the first aid part? So that's something that we offer. It's just good to offer CPR to all staff, and some are stepping up into that role of being a building response team.
And showing educators what the school would become one, an educator, they weren't planning on putting their fingers in holes and stopping mass bleeding and things like that, so they've come a long way, and our guys always go back in those classes impressed with how the teachers, the educators are in helping their students.
One nice thing that I've seen here, and not in all, is that we're not just going through with the dummy place, like I was the victim once here. It's a person, you're responding. We do drills that the building response team is made aware of, and then we do surprise ones. And the secretaries are actually calling 911. They're not just saying, oh, I would call 911 and do it. You're calling 911, you're executing the response, they have a rig, kind of on standby, they're responding. You're going through every element of first aid response in that, which is something that is actually unique to the different systems. It's not always practiced everywhere. Looking at the mental health, so we would talk about some of the pieces, as Chief was talking, sometimes there are known individuals, and one of those pieces is prevention programs, understanding and having anti-bullying, social emotional learning, bystander training, all of those components in place, and having that understanding for ESC. I had kind of in notation put, there's students here. So we do have students, we do all the same drills, we have students that are on this campus, but we also have pieces for the adults. The piece that's in orange is the high school does not have, recall, like the social emotional and those consistent pieces. We have those K-8. We did not step forward with those specifically at high school. So you have all of the support services and all of that, but as far as lessons for students to reinforce, we do not have that in place at the high school level. We have the West Bend Way, we have some things around expectations behaviorally, but as far as some targeted lessons, those are not built at the high school, nor were they purchased. So that's just something to be aware of. Talked about the social media monitoring, the importance of people alerting us. And then the other pieces of the mental health framework, those teams and their licensed therapists, again, for the adult side, leading on the employee assistance program. And again, this we would consider a proactive foundational element because again, it's being an intention to building relationships and connections with kids, staff, et cetera, so that we're creating those pieces and we have awareness of our students who might be struggling with mental health so that we're aligning them to services and supports in a proactive manner before we need to respond to threat or self-harm or they're in a situation where they're creating harm to others. Any questions or pieces about the mental health component? In the training side of things, we talked about those first responder teams. We do modules on safety, on cycles. We, again, are certified for the NIM system. We're highly collaborative across agencies. And then there's a component of ongoing evaluation of our plans, our efforts. We've talked about kind of bolstering some of our shared training pieces. We start the year with some shared trainings, but just kind of moving that on and going ongoing evaluation. The pieces around training, I said it before, our primary focus is educating kids. Safety is an add-on piece to everyone's role. I don't have a standalone safety coordinator. I don't have our staff with dedicated training. It's part of their regular duties. I'm going to teach you strategies to teach a kid how to read. And by the way, I'm also training you on these elements. If we were to run any kind of days, which again, if you're looking to be in attention to safety, you're going to be doing at least 3 times a year, starting your year, mid-year, and before closure around the year. That's $315,000 a day for me to bring in every single staff member for a full day. So to do, I think that's the biggest piece, is around adult awareness, behavior, training, right? Training for situations that I never need. It is exactly how I want it. But to dedicate that time and not making it an add-on to anything else would take some consistent days, and that's kind of the cost. And again, too, we're leaning on collaboration, the things that we get. Dave and I take the largest piece around safety training, and then we work as a cabinet level and then administrative level on out for that. So I have a little typo. So just knowing that that is not a singular role in our district in any way. So, and then the other piece, any kind of increased equipment, when you're looking at, video surveillance and all of those, you have the elements of putting those in budget cycles for replacement and continuity, and then also the level of the pieces that are actually, they're more technology driven, is the resources in Tim's department to onboard, train, manage, and just handle all that with the existing staffing that we have. It is a piece for consideration too. Because again, we wish for all those things, but if I'm gonna buy it one time and never maintain it, or I'm not gonna have the staff to deploy it correctly or do something, then that's a false investment in security. So I think that's a large piece, for us to talk about, is that training and those, because again, right now it's add-ons for our organization.
I will just speak up on the training aspect, that I would be in favor of more training, more formalized, and I agree with Joel, what I'm hearing, I got zero experience at safety and security, but I know how to mentor people, and I have some discipline. And I think our district needs more mentoring and more discipline, helps catch a kid in. Like I'm with Chief, I got called into the office at 3rd grade for building a popsicle switchblade out of a rubber band and a popsicle. I know, that was the first time I went down to the principal's office, and then they called my mom and dad, and yeah, almost Kurt got in trouble here, but I never forgot that. Because then,
That's nice. That's nice that that shaped you.
anyway, so I'm in favor of more training, I mean, discipline, mentoring, our teachers, our parents, our community, all could use just more awareness.
Yeah. One of the pieces that the board's aware, community, if you're watching our meetings, and certainly I've shared with our departments is around our behavior data, working on calibrating our response, our coding, all of those pieces, pulling in all those. So I think we're a lot stronger than we have been. That is a piece to strengthen because, as you said, I'm all about having a learning environment that's not disrupted by not just a threat to safety, but by poor behavior. And poor behavior can cycle into something larger. So making sure we're disrupting that. With those, I think that's an ongoing piece that you see us doing.
Yeah, it's an interesting piece. Most of our conversation around school safety is we're talking about the one-off active shooter threat, when really we spend a tremendous amount of time making sure we're maintaining a safe and efficient learning environment where teachers teach, students learn, basically. So just at the high school, in 2022, we're already at 443 calls for service. 443 calls for service. That's not active shooter. That's us maintaining discipline, helping to maintain discipline. And we know that's a percentage number, right? That's the ones that the police need to be involved in. That's the ones that the police need to be involved in to the level that our officers formalized it in a call for service. We about double that number. We know our officers handle a lot of things informally in collaboration with the district that doesn't rise to a call for service. And we know there's probably double that number of the times that the district is handling it. Rightfully so. School issues, not police issues, but are still discipline issues within the schools. We are up right now.
And one of the things that we talked about, we had that concept of, do I need an officer in every single school? No, I don't see the need for those, but Chief and I have talked about, officer donut, if you don't know him, send that man a Christmas card, a gift, probably one of the hardest working SLOs I have because he's navigating Silverbrook Badger, and then the whole team's responding to elementary in any time. And again, it's just a collaborative piece. It's not that we have that many things, but being able to reach down and utilize his support at an earlier age to make that impression, talk about how this could have gone kind of thing, and do that, we really lean into that. So, that would be that expansion. If you were looking at someone who is just looking at just your elementary Silverbrook kind of load, that would, that would be it, in kind of additional staffing, for that piece, for SLO.
Well,
Again-
since you brought that up,
Yeah.
intended to just kind of pledge my continued investigation in a strategic and measured way, adding a staffing position to address that. So our role, Cap and my role, is to make sure that we're deploying our resources appropriately. So with that, high school is about 400 to 500 calls for service a year. It's about 173 SLOs. It's about 175 calls for service per SLO. Again, I explained it's more than that, but those are formalized. So about 175 per SLO. Badger is between 150 to 200 per year if you do a 6-year average. So about 175 complaints, calls for service per school liaison. We have one, so he's also handling 175. And if you combine Silverbrook, which is about 75 to 100, and the elementaries, which is 89 total of the 4 schools, our schools, about 175. So that would give us that 5th spot would be handling about 175 complaints. For all adults that understand that 175 complaints at an elementary school are different than 175 complaints at a high school. Much more involved in much. So that's one of the reasons why it's not at holy crap crisis stage. We didn't get some of that. Now we're managing it with our officer DONAP, with our new deployment of day shift and mid shift patrol officers assigned to the schools, getting engaged in the schools, following Ryan's model, to be honest with you. And not, unfortunately, not having the luxury of available time that Ryan has made sure he devoted to that, just within our own staffing models, within our patrol response. But we're gonna work towards that. So I will pledge to this group here that in a strategic and measured way, we will look to expand that role. Our 2023 budget's sealed, and so that would be something that I was looking like in the 2024 timeframe, but we will continue to work towards that. What I will tell you is that we've launched an unfunded position, a full-time CSO, Community Service Officer, unfunded for 2023, so we'll find our means for this. But they're gonna be focused on, we have a downtown parking enforcement ordinance that'll be coming out. They'll be their primary focus, but that will leave them about 7 more hours a day once we get it rolling. That they're secondary in how we're selling it to the council. How we will deploy them is patrolling school safety will be their secondary priority. They will be patrolling, not necessarily as community service, so it's non-sworn, non-armed, but they will be patrolling the parking lots of every elementary, every parochial school, then working their way through the middle school, intermediate, and high school to be that set of eyes that we need to get there, to be the person that says, before they even get to the ring camera, or the surveillance camera, to check in that we need a police response. So we'll be launching that in January, hopefully, as we can find staffing. We will be, it's posted now, it will be shortly. That will be launched January 1st. So we're going to supplement based on the conversations we had at our last meeting, based on I'm hearing promise to be responsive to the community. I'm hearing that's a need for us or something the community wants. So we'll be launching that January 1st. So we'll be increasing our level on our dime, not asking for that to be funded at all. That's our responsibility. And we'll talk when we move forward on the school liaison position to even out our resources.
And one of our things, Chief and I meet annually to look at that, look at the staffing, look at, kind of those duties and responsibilities. At no time did we feel we were shortchanging our schools or our students and that we had a crisis or something that was unmet. Again, looking at supplementary and looking at, how to get into proactive time, those kinds of things, and just being responsive.
I shared with you at the last board, we're well within our benchmarks of school liaison to student staff ratio, or to a student ratio, well within our benchmarks with our partner agencies in Southeast Wisconsin. In fact, probably a little bit ahead of the curve based on our numbers. But just seeing this as an opportunity and huge bunch of dynamics involved in that I know I've talked about briefly, but it's not just that base salary. It removes someone from our patrol. Our patrol staffing is already at its bare skeleton limits. We have 4 officers down right now, working through hiring processes like every other department is. So we have to make sure that we continue to provide police service to the rest of the city. When we are able to do that, we'll look at expanding that. The base salary is just the beginning. You're well aware. Right now, a day shift officer getting the special assignment pay for school liaison, their base salary is about $86,000. That's just the beginning. Yeah, their benefits, overtime, when we talked about high school football games and basketball games, which our cops are at, that's about 150 hours of overtime a year. That's a very conservative average. That's not funded by any of our MOE, that's self-funded funded by the department as it should be. A uniform and equipment, body worn camera duty, just to launch an officer is $123,000 a year, just to launch the first year, and that's not including recruit school tuition reimbursement, which we offer and have to get them to come work here, and a squad car, additional squad car, that's another $70,000. So we're talking $194,000 just to launch an additional officer. So when you saw me get a little squeamish at the last meeting when we were talking about adding a half a base salary after our budget had already closed, that's why I got squeamish. So that you're talking 194, and then if we move to the next year, to your point, this isn't a one-time expenditure. We have to be looking, is it sustainable? Even removing all those initial purchases, we're still in the $110,000, $118,000 range per year per officer when we added all the benefits and the clothing and equipment. And that's not infrastructure and training costs and all those things. Say that just to make sure we're all on the same page on the dynamic. It seems like such a great answer. Let's just hire everyone. There's a lot more dynamics involved. And I have a governing board, two of them, but also elected officials that are very concerned with being fiscally responsible, as am I. As is Captain Roller, we take that role very seriously. So a lot of dynamics in play that I just thought.
And understanding too, in that we're not paying that whole thing because that's a community benefit as well as school benefit. So the cost that we're seeing, as you could hear the chief talk about it, we're not absorbing all that cost. We're not we're all fiscal stewards for our taxpayers in our community. We're not double check, you're not getting money, I'm not getting money. We're looking at pooling our resource to make something happen that's of benefit to the entire community. And we're each kind of paying for a sliver of that pie. So the understanding of, as you said, not just the launch, but the long-term commitment, because our contract, our MOU does not represent the cost of Ford fully at all. So I think just reiterating that for our public is beneficial as well.
But we are launching the full-time CSO.
That's right.
That will be in addition to our school safety plan, and we will pledge to you, will continue to investigate moving to that SLO and strategically measured.
So in my slides, I have additional resources, links to NIMS, different maps. Again, we're not going through everything. It's just an opportunity. We've taken some dialogue and questions along the way. But with that, any continued discussion from any of our agency partners, any of our board members?
I'll throw this out there because I think there's probably members of our community who would want me to throw this out there, who have suggested arming teachers, hiring instead of a sworn officer, hiring a private civilian to be an armed guard, if you will. What are the pros and cons from the district side, from law enforcement, on doing, do communities do that?
Well, I'll take the easy one first, arming the teachers. It really is a non-starter conversation because it's not allowed by statute. The statute we have to change. If statute changes, then it's a conversation that can be had. But right
Statute
now,
meaning Wisconsin is a gun-free school zone.
Wisconsin law prohibits
Correct, yeah, just want to
even
make sure.
CCW,
People
carry,
watching.
no matter who they are, the law would have to change. So there's some misconceptions about some of our neighboring districts and some of the initiatives they put forward. It was more to make sure the legislature was know they had an interest. It didn't change the law, it doesn't allow it, it's not allowable by law, so it's kind of a non-starter. If the law changes, then we have to have that conversation. Being married to a 32-year educator and hanging around educators for most of my professional life, I think there's me personally. I'm sure there's some that how do I say it, Joel?
Well,
I like a system where
I can't either.
teachers teach.
Yeah.
I like a system where teachers teach. I love that Emily looks at when a kid makes a dumb mistake, I look at zero tolerance and let's get them in the system so they're held accountable. But I can only do that. I can only do that in good conscience because I know my partner Emily is thinking, hey, there's a lot going on. How do we get them? How do we return them to being healthy, happy, kind, productive members of society?
The larger
So there's a
piece-
weird, I'm sorry, just
Yeah.
2 seconds. So there's a weird dichotomy that I want our teachers focused on education. I don't think there's a reasonable understanding of what training has to take place. $315,000 a day to train, okay, that's the whole staff. But also the psychological, we spend a tremendous amount of money and resources. They can't come to us until they've passed schooling, recruit school, and then we spend a tremendous amount of money to make sure that they're making good use of forces. Not teaching people how to shoot, that is 4 or 5%. That's 4 or 5%. 95% is when to shoot, when not to shoot, de-escalation. We just went through this entire period in our nation's history where we questioned the authority of the police. We're still in it, right? Questioning the authority of the police, the intention of the police, of their use of force, and how we need to change our model. Well, we don't have to change our model. I'll be 100% upfront on that because we've always been nothing but professional and worried about stopping threats, keeping people safe. And the last thing any of our cops want to do is utilize force. But that's such a grave concept topic, something I care deeply and passionately about, that I would worry about our teachers. That's not to say I don't think there's some that certainly would have the ability to go through that training, but I think it's a larger piece. And I would prefer we implement systems where teachers teach, kids learn, we police and keep safe. I know people might disagree with that, but that's my.
In our previous conversations, we just talked about the liability of that, and, you know, and we have external factors where we haven't had to face that conversation right now, but introducing that element into a classroom increases risk and access where it wasn't there before. So again, if we were looking at safety security, I don't necessarily need that embedded in the classrooms. I need that out front, perimeter, you know, those different pieces to create a safe campus. And access and those. And I think to that point around making sure that I have people who are highly trained, I also need some kind of integration with agencies, because I can't have you coming to respond and you don't know who's who, because you're going to end up hitting the wrong person in that scenario, because you're there to neutralize something and do it quickly, and everyone's going to appear as a threat in that scenario. So I think that the expansion is of and through some kind of agency collaboration. It could be different, you know, maybe it's different individuals, different training, but you said that there's gotta be some element there. You know, like we wouldn't just allow anyone at any time. I think the advocacy is around what comes to all of us as what we perceive, and I'll say this for me selfishly, it's an unfunded mandate that has changed over the last how many years in schools, that all of a sudden security is every bit as amplified as these pieces. And I think when we see people stepping into an advocacy arena, it's around them helping fund or have access to these pieces. Help police get and not be short-staffed. Help these pieces to do that. And that's where efforts, you know, to help increase need to be there. Because again, we're looking at this in the context of our budget, and here we are saying every agency tells me that these are best practices, and I have to figure that out locally every time. So I think that's a hardship in and of itself. And then it creates differences across systems, across, you know, in all of those pieces. So again, proud of the work we have. There's certain things we can improve and do, but I think that's an unusual system of pretty foundational support that's needed for communities.
Well, and to put it into perspective, let's talk about something probably not too many people like, the dentist. I like my dentist to actually be a dentist. I like him to have a PhD in dentistry before he uses sharp tools in my mouth. Now, I certainly think that the chief is very capable in his job, but I don't think he's a dentist. I'm not letting him fill my tooth. I'm letting him be a police person and be in charge of our safety. So I think we want to let the experts do their job as opposed to expecting everyone to be an expert in everything. We all know what happens, right? You try and do too many things, something's going to fail. You can't be good at everything, except for Jen Wimmer, who is good at everything, okay? But for the rest of us, I just think we need to be realistic. You're asking someone to do something that is completely not what they're trained to do, and completely, for many of them, out of their comfort zone. And that is not someone that I feel confident in doing something. When I'm out of my comfort zone, I'm not confident in what I'm doing. So let's go back to, I'm afraid of the dentist. I want him to be as trained as humanly possible. I don't want you to be, you know, a brand new dentist, and I certainly don't want you to be a non-trained dentist.
But I think that then, you know, having cleared that and understanding that there's a specialty there, right, that we would value, then that other piece is, because again, the quickness and just presenting that view is, then why isn't there someone everywhere? Right? Because if we know an incident is going to be over within 5 minutes and standard response times and all of those things, then I think that was that next layer of then why not someone everywhere? And in a perfect world, would someone who's armed, trained, connected to agencies be everywhere that we need them to be? I think that's that next piece is that accessibility. But again, and I think that's just some of the things that, as I talk with constituents, is around then put someone everywhere. You know, if we're gonna draw the line there, then put someone everywhere for that scenario. Because it's scary, we're talking about people's children, you know, and so it's like, you want to put everything in place.
Sure, and
so.
it brings a lot of emotions in, it brings emotions in myself, right? But again, I bring us back to, there's always a balance between safety and efficiency. There could be medical emergencies at every school. You know, we should have an ambulance and a fully staffed medical crew at every school. Not reasonable, right? We have to look at our resources and allocate them smartly and think of what we need to do to solve the problem. We're again focused on a solution for statistical anomaly, but we have to get it. But there's also a tremendous, a larger amount of dynamics that come into play in school safety that our officers deal with every day. 400 to 500 calls for service a school year at the high school. 3 school liaisons. They're dealing with fights. They're dealing with all the things that high school kids deal with now. Vapes, drugs, disrespect, everything, right? Fraud, theft, everything. There's all those components too. So we're looking at like this one piece as the fix. So what is the piece? What's a reasonable resource allocation? It's what we talked about. Hardening the schools. It is about buying time. I hate that my profession has become this, but we've become extremely good at responding to crisis. We've become extremely good. I shouldn't say I hate it, I'm proud of us, but when I started, that wasn't the focus. When I started, I could go into an interview and say, I'm here to help people, and I'm gonna have to write a couple of traffic tickets, and probably gonna maybe at some point go to a really bad domestic abuse. That's only 28 years ago. And now, we're really good. Ryan's entire staff is going to be in West Bend, no matter where it's at. We're going to be in Jackson. So is the county, so is Slinger, so is Kewaskum, so is Fond du Lac, Fort Washington, we're gonna be here. West Bend, we're a safe community. You're getting a junk load of cops. Yeah, and in fact, it's not a joke, but they know it. They're gonna race to beat Captain and I there, because we're going to be at any school. You know, he and I were one of the first 2 on the spot at the guy with the knife at the election zone, and then amongst a whole bunch of other cops. So we're gonna get there, so you just have to give us those tools to buy the time to get there and handle it correctly. And then we're gonna handle all those other things that affect school safety, and we are handling them collaboratively, and we're gonna make sure it's a safe and effective school environment. It's our number 1 priority at our department.
And just a public plug for the Citizens Academies that our police run, to grow understanding, because it's like that iceberg, right? We see that tip, but there's so much going on. They're keeping so much out of my schools and off my streets, in the community that we all mutually serve. When I think about, you know, things that have evolved, not just school safety, but access to narcotics, prescription drugs, all of that kind of stuff, and slowing that and being aware of that and keeping it out. Because that's another element that has changed and evolved, and it's something, again, I know that many of us in this room have sat in the Citizens Academy, and just that mutual understanding of, like you said, sometimes you're not talking about all the things that didn't happen, you know, knowing that we're prepared for things that do happen, but it's just an understanding for people around the departments, and I know you both do those. So just a plug for citizens to sign up for that and grow that and understand, and even, you know, maybe some people will see that, and that could be a recruiting tool, and you're looking at future officers who try that out as well. But
we're not. I'm in the process right now, have been all year. If you have anyone they think would be a great public servant and serve our community, send them our way.
any other closing comments, questions, et cetera?
No, I said send them our way.
Well, you know, we need to work together, because we are partnered with an EMS certification class. We're looking at, you know, a fire academy. We're looking at a lot of things, because
We're brothers that love each other. It's just the ongoing, everybody's fighting for it.
It's an element we don't often talk about, but we are growing the future workforce, and that exposure for our students to different pathways, different pieces, and who are being certified or having experiences in the organizations who are pursuing that or maybe interested, saving them some time and effort. So there's that element of our work too, that we do. So.
I just want to thank our law enforcement and fire department representatives for coming. We really, really appreciate it. Just speaking from my perspective, it's great to see kind of that next level down, the inner workings, just kind of peering behind the curtain a little bit. And clearly there's a lot of collaboration. It's given me more understanding and more comfort. But thank you for the 2+ hours you spent with us this afternoon. I know you've got busy jobs and schedules as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. You're modest, also an alumni of the police academy. I think, if I remember right, you were valedictorian.
Of course he was. Yeah, anyone who volunteers to get tased is, I don't know, that's questionable.
But that is an amazing program.
But yeah.
So thank you very much. Any other questions, comments?
Just echo that. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Sorry for talking too much.
That's why we brought you
You're the
here.
valedictorian of this.
Oh, stop.
No additional, we are
Accidentally, no.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
And our.
I'll sit right here.
Our-